Hello, and thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Amy. If you are new here, thanks so much for coming. And if you're not new here, thanks so much for coming back. Today's video is one that I actually promised last week, but didn't film because life. And it'll probably go up next week, so you won't even see it in real time. But today I'm going to talk about IVF, specifically our IVF journey as we traveled it, and just kind of, first of all, what it looked like at the beginning of the cycle to the end of the cycle, just kind of like appointments when we started different things, and then I'll go over the specific med protocol that I was on, kind of just to give you an idea. I do want to say that not all IVF cycles are going to be the same. There are many IVF cycles. There are just a ton of different options. It's all going to depend on you, why you're doing IVF, how your body's responding to medications, if you have any health concerns or anything like that, if you're using donor eggs, all this stuff. All of that will vary. But for us, we were going in with unexplained secondary infertility. I've had successful pregnancies in the past. All of my labs looked good. The only thing that was kind of an issue was my thyroid. But otherwise, everything else looked good. And so for us, that's where we were kind of starting. Now, we did our IVF cycle at CNY, which is a fertility clinic in New York. They do have a couple other satellite locations where you can do like monitoring, but their main stuff is done in New York. It is significantly cheaper, but you do have to travel. So there's that. So I'm just gonna kind of, like I said, jump into it and start off with kind of outline of where we started, and then I'll go into some more detail about some of the med protocols and stuff. First of all, what is IVF? IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. You can do it with or without ICSI or ICSI, which is intracytomoplasmic sperm injection. And I'll talk about that later. There are other options, like I said, mini cycles, where you do just a reduced amount of meds for minimal stimulation. We did an IVF cycle with full stimulation, full meds. We did do ICSI. We did not do PGS testing. So for us, our journey started after 2 years of trying to get pregnant. After Lily was born, she's our fourth, we decided that we wanted to have a fifth baby, which for us was kind of out there because we decided after Jacob, our third, that we were done. We didn't want any more babies. We weren't planning on having any more. And then we became pregnant with Lily quite by surprise. I'm not going to say accident because I know how these things happen and we were doing those things. But she was a surprise. So we had Lily and I was terrified. I was terrified to be pregnant. I was like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with 4 babies? I thought that 3 was all I could handle. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then Lily came along and we have been extremely blessed by her. She's an addition to our family that we just didn't know we were missing, but I don't know what we'd do without her. So we started talking and said, well, do we really feel done, or were we done because everybody else made us feel done? And we kind of decided we were done because other people made us feel done, so we wanted a 5th child. So we started trying in January of 2017, figuring we'd get pregnant pretty quickly. I had no trouble getting pregnant prior, and so we figured we'd probably have a baby by the end of 2017. That didn't happen. So after we did, and I talked about this in my secondary infertility video if you want to watch that. A basic rundown of what the secondary infertility treatments that we tried. We went through a couple medicated cycles with just Clomid and timed intercourse. We did a couple of IUIs with Clomid. Nothing was successful. We moved across the country and I had thought about setting up a consult for the IVF, but I wasn't really sure. And then after 3 early losses, biochemical pregnancies, early miscarriage, whatever you want to call them, I got pregnant. I was able to get pregnant, but I did not stay pregnant. So after that, we just kind of decided, yep, we're going to go ahead and do a cycle of IVF. We want a baby. We can afford it right now. Let's just do this. We started with baseline labs in January. They took like 6 or 7 vials of blood. It was awesome. My husband was complaining about a blood draw that he had to do at the VA prior, and he's like, oh man, they took like 3 or 4 vials of blood. So I texted him, I'm like, yeah, they just took 7, and he has not complained since then. They took a lot of blood. So they tested, I'm going to read you what they tested just because I have it written down here. They tested prolactin, testosterone, for rubella antibodies, which is German measles, which is part of the MMR vaccine. They checked my blood type, my CBC for Hep A, Hep B, Hep C, HIV, chickenpox antibodies, an RPR, an A1C to check my blood sugar levels. They checked my AMH, and they checked my vitamin D. So those are all just kind of baseline labs that they do when they're checking to see where their starting point is to start the protocol for IVF. At that time, I also went in, so on January 22nd of 2019, I went in and I did a transvaginal ultrasound. They did a check for the number of follicles that were present on my ovaries, the size of each, my lining thickness, and the type of my lining. There's different patterns in your lining that indicate whether or not it would be potentially successful. That's a whole thing. I'm not going to go into all the particulars here, but anyway, they checked all of that in labs on January 22nd. After my baseline labs, when we decided we were going to start my cycle, I had called them and said I started my period. So that's when we did the transvaginal ultrasound. We did another panel checking my estrogen, progesterone, LH, FSH, TSH, and HCG to make sure that you're not pregnant before you start stimulation medications. I started my cycle. We did the baseline labs January 29th, which was 7 days after my baseline labs, and that we did another ultrasound to check for the follicles and size and all of that again, and did another estrogen, progesterone, and LH, just to check to make sure that those were at or within normal range for a female who's in her reproductive years, and they were. So February 1st, I went back for my ultrasound. Again, did the estrogen, progesterone, and LH. And then February 5th was retrieval day. So we left our kids with a friend who was gracious enough to take all 4 of them and the ferrets while we drove. Tim and I drove. At the time we were living in Charlotte. We drove from Charlotte up to New York for our retrieval. So then we had retrieval day on February 5th. So retrieval day, they got 30 eggs, 24 were mature and fertilized using ICSI. Of those 24, 19 took to the fertilization, and of those 19, 10 of them grew successfully into day 5 or 6 embryos. We elected not to do a fresh transfer, partially because we didn't have time to stay that long and do a transfer, partially because I wanted to let my body calm down after all the stimulation meds and stuff, because my ovaries, I mean, it wasn't painful. Some people get hyperstimulation, OHSS, which is ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It's not comfortable. I was very bloated and it was very painful because they aspirate the eggs from your ovaries. So they'll either go in through your abdominal wall or through your vaginal wall, and they take a needle and a scope so they can see what they're doing. They use ultrasound to guide it. And they take a needle and they poke it into your ovaries, into each follicle, and they take the eggs out of each follicle. So imagine just a lot of little needle pokes over and over again. They got 30 eggs out. And I don't know how many follicles they poked because, you know, some of them may have had nothing in them. Some follicles may have had more than 1 egg. I don't know, but I know it was a lot of poking. So I was very tender and sensitive. So we wanted to just kind of give it time to do that. All of our embryos were good quality, if not great quality, so that was fantastic. We elected not to do the PGS testing, which is pre-implantation genetic screening. It's where they check to make sure that every egg has 23 pairs of matching chromosomes. We have not yet had a child that has had any issue with that, and if there was any issue with that, we didn't feel like it would make a difference as to whether or not we would love that child, so we just elected not to do it. Then we traveled home. We took a break. Life happened. We were going to transfer embryos the following cycle. We were going to wait, go through February, start my cycle in March, and then plan to transfer in March or April. Yeah, life got in the way, so we didn't do a transfer. Tim actually ended up losing his job and then starting a new job, and so we were like kind of in financial limbo. We were like, we don't want to spend this money to travel, you know, whatever. So we didn't transfer then. And then my sister was coming to visit in June, and so it just kind of didn't happen and it got pushed off. So we ended up actually doing our transfer in July. So July 23rd was our transfer day. We did I drove up actually with Emma this time. Tim stayed and worked from home with the other children because he was able to do that. And Emma and I drove up to New York. We went in for a transfer. I had acupuncture right before my transfer. They did the transfer, and then I had post-transfer acupuncture. Just kind of hung out. Excuse me. They transferred a 3AB embryo. That means, so the number, it goes from 1 to 6, and it'll line out for you where the embryo is kind of developmentally. So like 1 is the earliest stage of an embryo. So the earliest stage of cell division is considered an embryo. 6 is a fully hatched embryo that is like, it's divided, it's hatched out of the eggshell, and it is ready to basically immediately implant. Mine was a 3, which is good. That means it's not hatching yet, but it was developed quite well and had begun to expand. The letters, so the first letter is the inner cell mass rating, which is the one that's going to become the baby, and the second letter is the outer cell mass rating, which is going to become the placenta and the supporting tissue for the pregnancy. They go from, I think, A to D. I don't actually know. I'll let you know. But mine was a 3AB. It's very good quality. I would like to note that quality does not necessarily mean chance of success. I have heard stories where people have transferred a what's considered a poor quality embryo because it's all they had, and they were successfully pregnant. I have heard people transfer like a 5AA embryo, which is like super high quality, and it didn't take. So that's just kind of like where they look, okay, well, you know, here's where we're at. They grade them, but it's not necessarily pertinent. Anyway, so that was kind of our process that we went through to get there. So now let's talk med protocol. This is the fun part. So back to January when I started my cycle. You'll remember that I went in for the baseline labs and all of that. And after the baseline labs, while we were waiting for those results, we started our cycle. So Friday, January 25th through the 29th, my med protocol was as follows. I did 300 IUs of subcutaneous injections of gonal F once a day in the evening. I did an HCG LH supplement. I'm reading this, I'm sorry if I'm looking down. Which is 20 IUs once a day as well, also subcutaneous. So those were in my belly, just like pinched, small, I mean, tiny needle, not super long. You just pinch a roll, stick it in, it's fine. I was also taking Z-Pak, prednisone, and LDN daily, low-dose naltrexone. It's just part of the protocol that they use. There is some benefit shown to reduce inflammation and reduce immune response to help prevent rejection of pregnancy and to help with development of eggs and things like that. It's a thing. It's a whole thing. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all the little details. The prednisone was twice a day, and then I took my prenatal vitamins. On day 6 of my cycle, all the meds were the same, except for I had finished the Z-Pak, so I wasn't taking that anymore. And then I added 0.25 milligrams of cetrotide in the morning. And that continued through day 9. Day 10, I started cetrotide. I did the cetrotide shot. I stopped taking the gonal F and the HCG supplements. I still did the prednisone and the prenatal. I added a Lupron trigger shot, which was a 4 milligram injection, and I did that at 9:30 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. on that day. And then at 9:30 p.m. the same day, I also did a pregnal injection, which is a trigger shot type thing as well. So day 11, I did prednisone, my prenatal, and the Lupron shot again at 9:30 a.m. I got a little bit of a break and didn't have to do anything in the evening. It was kind of nice. And then I went in on day 12, which was retrieval day. And we drove after our retrieval. They, you know, like I mentioned before, they retrieved the eggs, the embryos, they froze them. 5 days later, they actually ended up calling us later to let us know, but at the time we didn't know, but they did the retrieval. I knew how many eggs they had gotten, how many were mature. And that was it. So we drove to Pennsylvania. We stopped at this cute little bed and breakfast that also had like a smorgasbord buffet attached to it, and oh my lord, it was delicious. So we drove to Pennsylvania, stopped there, ate at the buffet, and spent the night there, and then we got the next morning and drove home. So that brings us all the way from February forward to July. So for our transfer portion of it, it looked kind of like this. Cycle day 1 started July 5th. So I called the clinic, let them know that I was on my cycle and that we wanted to do the transfer this month. And they said, okay. And they sent me my protocol. So cycle day 5 through cycle day 13, we did 2 milligrams of estrogen twice a day, 12 hours apart. That was a pill that I took. So I think I was taking them, if I remember correctly, at 10 and 10. So I took one right at bedtime and then one at 10. We did 5 milligrams of prednisone twice a day. That was also a pill. And the LDN low-dose naltrexone, 4.5 milligrams at bedtime once a day. A baby aspirin once a day. And then my prenatal vitamin. That was everything that we did basically through cycle day 13, and then on cycle day 14 we kept all of that, and then we added 0.5 milligrams of Prograf twice a day, which is a pill. We did Cleocin 100 milligram suppositories at bedtime. That is just an antibiotic to prevent, because there's no real way to make your cervix and your vagina sterile for any sort of procedure. So they just kind of want to make sure that there's no bacteria in that region so that they can, I mean, they use sterile instruments, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, prevent infection. So we did those. I took endometrin, which is a vaginal suppository. It was 100 milligrams twice a day. And then I did progesterone and oil shots starting on cycle day 14, which was my least favorite part of this whole thing. I dreaded it. I feared it. I built it up into something awful, and I suffered until I learned how to do it correctly. So the progesterone and oil shots are an intramuscular injection, and I had planned to take them in the evening. I didn't communicate super well with my nursing staff, and I was just going to take them in the evening. Tim would give them to me before bed. You know, we'd prep everything. He'd give me the shot. I'd go to sleep. Turns out I have to take them in the morning, so he had already left for work, and the nurse was like, well, it's not too late. Go ahead and do the first shot now, and then just move them earlier tomorrow. So I had to give myself my first progesterone and oil shot by myself, with no support and no help. So Tim did the progesterone and oil shots for me every morning. He would just get up at 6 a.m. when his alarm went off. I would get up and prep the shot, go lay down. He would give me the shot and bring me a rice pack that we heated up and put on there. It helps disperse the oil, and it helps prevent knots and stuff like that in your butt. Yeah, it was amazing. So cycle day 14 through 18, we did the same protocol, and cycle day 18 was transfer day. We went in, they transferred the embryo. Like I said, it was a 3AB embryo, and then we waited until cycle day 24 and did labs. The labs were just like progesterone, estrogen, and LH again. And then we went in, I went back cycle day 27, which was the 1st of August. I was 9 days past my 5-day transfer, which is the equivalent of being 14 days past ovulation. They did an HCG and progesterone. My HCG was 83, which is fantastic. That means that the embryo implanted and had continued to grow. We got the results back the next day on the 28th, and they said, yay, you're pregnant. You can stop the aspirin and continue the rest. So we did that. Cycle day 31, we repeated the HCG, the estrogen, the progesterone, and the TSH, which is my thyroid, to check where that was at. I needed to have 332 for my beta number on HCG for it to be doubling within a 72-hour window, which is 72 hours or less on doubling time is usually a good indication of healthy progression in a pregnancy. So I needed 332. It was 600. So I was excited, but I was still nervous, but I was excited. So August 12th, which was our anniversary, we went in. I went in. I had an OB ultrasound. They did a redraw of the HCG. I was 5 days and 4 weeks along, measured perfectly. They were able to see a sac and an egg sac and a yolk, which was good. There was no heartbeat, so that was, but I mean, that's normal for that time. My beta came back at 12,181, which is spectacular. I went back the next week, 6 weeks and 4 days. They did another ultrasound. At that time, they were able to find a fetal pole, which meant that we had a successful pregnancy, and they transferred me to OB care. So I was no longer under the care of my fertility doctor. I was under the care of a regular OB. Hello, kitty. But I still continued to take the medications. The estrogen I took until 10 weeks. The progesterone shots, the progesterone oil shots, I took until 10 weeks. And the vaginal suppositories I took until 12 weeks. And then I took discontinued the prednisone, the LDN, all that other stuff. So I was just on the shots and the suppositories and the estrogen pills, and I was able to stop everything completely at 12 weeks. I am now 30 weeks pregnant, almost 30 weeks, a little past 30 weeks. I'm not sure. I can't remember what I'll be when this goes up. Anyway, it was successful. Thank the Lord. So we are a year out from when we initially started the IVF process. I do not regret it. There was a lot of stress and turmoil, which I can talk about in a different video, but this was just kind of like a semantics, like how does it go type of video. So that's where we're at. I do intend to make another video that I will follow up this one with. It's kind of a like, where are we at? What are we going to do now? Because we do still have 9 frozen embryos that look good and are healthy, and we have to kind of make a decision what to do with those. So if that's something that you want to know about, watch for that video. Click subscribe down below so you don't miss it. I'm not entirely sure when it will be going up because I do have some pregnancy updates coming up as well. But I will film that video and I will get it up. So there you go. Thanks so much for coming and watching today. I hope this video was helpful to somebody. If you're getting ready to start the IVF process or you're just curious about how it might go, then hopefully this was a blessing to you, and I will see you back here real soon with more pregnancy updates. I'm going to talk about intermittent fasting and pregnancy and just general life. So if you're interested, again, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you back soon. Bye.